I'd like to start with my colleague Paul.
I'm very grateful, Convener, and good morning to Caroline and John. I wonder if I can begin. Committee recognises that asylum and immigration are reserve matters, but we, I think, are particularly interested in the devolved areas, particularly looking at the Scottish Government's work to address many of the issues which we've already heard this morning and throughout our evidence. So I suppose if I can just perhaps ask you to share with us what involvement you have had with the Scottish Government strategies, particularly the New Scot strategy and the Ending Destitution strategy.
We work, and we have worked since mobilising the contracts back in 2019, very closely with the Scottish Government, COSLA, and the Glasgow City Council Partnership Board. So the Scottish Government, we probably meet once a month and more regularly during the COVID periods to make sure that they're fully informed of the accommodation contracts, the issues that we're facing, particularly during the COVID period, the pressure on numbers, and that Scotland wasn't a routing area for periods of that COVID time. So we've had direct conversations. We are at the moment looking to meet with the relevant ministers to discuss a number of issues that are facing the asylum contracts in the next year, namely around wide dispersal and the impact on local authorities across Scotland, particularly around health, education, social services, and how that can be supported, how that can be managed whilst not conflicting with other projects, such as the Ukrainian programme, Afghan, Syrians, unaccompanied children, all of which are looking for accommodation. We're very concerned that we end up chasing the same properties, and clearly, and the other issue we want to discuss in more detail with the Scottish ministers around homelessness. We are going to see a lot more people now having decisions being made in the system, having decisions being stopped during COVID, and therefore, with a number of positive decisions, there's going to be real pressure on homelessness and how we can work together to make sure there's a balance and we don't create another problem as people come out of the asylum system. So we've always worked closely with the Scottish Government, and I think hopefully we'll work ever closer, because I think the next couple of years could be very challenging on a number of levels. Wide dispersal does change the landscape significantly.
Caroline?
Caroline, do you have anything to add?
Yes, thank you. Migrant helps closely involved in delivering towards the 5 principles of the New Scots approach, supporting integration from day one and building on the rights-based approach through initial induction information and through the 24/7 helpline. We provide induction on arrival, including translated induction booklets, followed by verbal induction briefings with interpreters. We involve asylum seekers and victims of modern slavery through our lived experience advisory panels to develop and to improve our services. We have a community liaison coordinator, and we have regional managers for both services. And both of our head of regional services and our head of business support services have been working and living in Scotland for many years. We collaborate with other charities and with the COSLO, and we're part of working groups with both. We've got those other charities who have given evidence in this session: Red Cross, Scottish Refugee Council, and Refugee we work very closely with, and Tara we work with on behalf of the Scottish Government.
Thank you, Convener. John, you mentioned the challenges, I think, that exist currently in terms of the interaction with local authorities, particularly around housing supply. Wider dispersal, in your view, will exacerbate those issues. In your view, is the challenge with local authorities in terms of what's available, or is it about how MEARS chooses to interact with that? I mean, there have been a number of high-profile cases that I think we would all recognise that have been particularly concerning. And is your view that that's about the interaction with local authorities? Is that where the problem is?
No, not at all. I think the interaction with local authorities in Scotland has been incredibly positive. Through COSLA, we've been discussing wide dispersal since the autumn, and we've taken time to make sure there's an agreement about how wide dispersal can be managed in a planned way, strategic way, but also trying to demonstrate some fairness in the system, that we don't have more asylum in one area than others. So all 32 councils have looked to participate, and we're trying to work through the acquisition process to make sure that we have that fair dispersal across Scotland. I'd say that every council has entered into those conversations with a good deal of openness and willingness to participate and understand the system. Glasgow have been particularly strong in explaining how well we work with Glasgow and how dispersal works and the support needs in dispersed accommodation. So I don't think that's the case. I think we have some very good relationships with the local authorities, and COSLA are very good at managing that in a formal governance structure. I think the issue for us is more around supply, and there is a limited supply of accommodation in the private housing market. And as I said, there's a lot of programmes that are all looking to access that private market, whether it's homelessness. So Glasgow has a particular challenge around homelessness at the moment, and they will take the brunt, if you like, of the challenge of housing people that get the right to remain in Scotland, and they're looking then to go through the Scottish and the Glasgow Homelessness Service. So it's about how the impact on this programme, the number of properties we need to get people into their own homes, where do we procure them, where will it be safe, where can we make sure we get the right services to people, that they're not isolated, that we deal with community cohesion issues, that our service users can access legal services, they can access local community and faith groups. That is a huge operation to make sure that as we go into new areas, they're supported, and that our acquisition of property doesn't then conflict with the programme to find accommodation for Ukrainians, the Afghans, or indeed local homelessness services. So there's quite a complex network of issues, but I would say that our conversations with the Scottish councils have been incredibly positive and very welcoming.
I wonder, just on the point about local authorities, before I move on to a human rights approach, I wonder, Caroline, in terms of your interaction with local authorities, where do you see the gaps currently, or the challenges, I think, in terms of wider support provision?
The wide dispersal area and the short time frame in which it is needed to stand up properties. So it's very difficult to find accommodation for asylum seekers very quickly. Once it's identified, there's a need to place people there. So I think the lead time to bring in support is difficult. And there's also a huge risk, and we're seeing this around the country, that support for asylum seekers is very focused in specific regions where there's historically been a great deal of dispersal. And opening up new regions means there's a limited amount of support function